an insider's look at journalism in St. Louis. That's our topic next on City Corner. Hi, I'm Steve Potter. Welcome to City Corner. And today we're talking about something I know a little bit about, and that's journalism in St. Louis, but my guest knows a lot more than I do. Please meet Jeanette Cooperman. Hi, Jeanette. How are you?
Hi, I'm fine, thank you.
Welcome to the show.
Thanks.
And I understand your husband actually is a fan of City Corner, even before he knew you were going to be on it.
Exactly. Yeah, that predates me.
Jeanette, first, congratulations, because you just recently, after working many years, you worked at the Riverfront Times and for St. Louis Magazine, and you just recently started a new adventure in your life, which is something called The Common Reader at Washington University. What is that?
It is a journal of the essay. It was started by Gerald Early, who's an amazing professor and writer. And I have the freedom of writing essays about all sorts of things.
Now, when you say essay, does that just mean an opinion piece?
No, it's an exploration. So there's some research to it, there's some thinking through, but it's a little softer. The idea is not to persuade anyone of anything. It's not even really so much to inform in a teacherly or news reporter way. It's to explore. And that's why it's intriguing intellectually.
Does that mean you're 100% neutral as you would be as a reporter, or is there a fine line there?
There's a fine line I'll probably learn to walk. But for example, I mean, let's see, I've been writing about cancel culture, about
what culture?
Cancel culture, you know, where people say, now kids are doing it, started with celebs, but you're canceled. So, you know, it's like, it's kind of questionable in terms of where it's going to take us. About ghosting in relationships, about the politicization of the poodle, about why there's more vomit in movies, because that is just making me crazy because I'm phobic about it. And if you notice, the incidence has ratcheted up considerably, just as Chipmunk Speed is coming to films, and yeah, there's more.
More vomit on film.
I checked it out. That's what I mean. There's research involved. Yeah.
I wouldn't know that if I hadn't.
No, that one's making me queasy. And I'm writing about Afghan war rugs, which is fascinated me. I really went down the rabbit hole on that one. And the fossil forest in Illinois, where you live, but north of you. Do you know about the fossil forest?
Never heard of it.
It is amazing. They found that the ceiling of these mines was the floor of a forest in the Pennsylvanian era, and it was fossilized essentially all at once. It's sort of an early climate change phenomenon, but because it happened all at once, the entire forest floor is there. And when they went down into these mines and looked up, they could see creatures like millipedes the size of cows, and the dragonflies had like 2-foot wingspans, and bugs were huge because it was so oxygen rich in that era. So, I mean, it was wild.
And where are those?
Danville is one of the areas. It's the coal mines in Illinois.
North of St. Louis, kind of a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, one more thing that you mentioned in passing that it caught my attention, because a long time ago I used to, not as a profession, but I used to breed toy poodles.
Oh, you did? We have standards.
And so what did you just say about the poodle article you wrote?
The politicization, I'm still researching it. I can't even say politicization. But remember when we were, when Tony Blair was our poodle, and then the talk was whether Trump was Putin's poodle?
Oh, yeah.
And then you get into all the other references culturally of the poodle, you know, the poodle skirt and poodles as a sign that someone had money. When women got wealthy, they would get a fur coat, jewels, and a poodle, and the poodle should match their hair. And you know, these were hunting dogs, and it's amazing what a cultural trope they have become.
Did you ever hear of Junior Cotillion? Did they have it around here? Junior Cotillion was a social thing you'd send your little kids to learn.
To learn dance?
Well, dance was part of it, dance and social etiquette.
Right.
And I'll never forget, when I was 13, going to Junior Cotillion, I wish I could remember the ladies. There was what appeared to be a rich old lady that ran it, and she had a poodle that matched her hair.
There you go. What color?
I don't remember now. That's been the 1960s, so it's been a while.
Yeah.
But Jeanette, when did you, number one, you were born and raised in the St. Louis area.
Yep, grew up in Normandy.
And here's what a little side trivia. My grandfather was principal in Normandy for 20, 30 years. And even you didn't go to public schools, but
No.
if you had gone to a public school, my grandfather would have been your principal.
Yes, because that's where I would have gone.
Well, how'd you get into journalism?
By accident. I wasn't sure what to major in college. I was not like kids today who know when they're 10. And so I was casting about. I took a communications course. The professor was amazing, and I fell in love with it. But then we had to do papers on careers in journalism, and I found out there weren't any because Watergate had created such a glut of interest, So that was before print was dying. That was back when everybody wanted to go be an investigative reporter. So I set it aside, and then I just kept writing, and I had jobs writing, and I got a PhD in American Studies thinking I would teach. I was freelancing just to make money at the Riverfront Times. They offered me a job, and I thought, oh, I would so much rather do this. So the writing is freer than all the footnoting and the caveats of academia.
Of course, I don't think it's as much the case now, but I remember a couple of decades ago, Riverfront Times, it was exciting, not that it's not now, but it was exciting because it was really edgy compared to other stuff.
Oh yeah, it was great fun. I grew up very docile, so it was fun.
So did you know Ray Hartman before that?
Not before I went to work for him, but certainly.
But he was part owner of St. Louis Magazine when you worked there as well, right?
Yes, exactly. By then I knew him well, and he called. He needed an editor of the magazine because his editor was going to have a baby, and she didn't want to work so hard anymore. She wanted to take time for family. So he called and asked if I would come and do it. And I did for 2.5 years, and I hated being an editor.
Because that's an office job.
It's an office job, and there's all these tugs on your sleeve, and you have to make decisions fast, and everybody's coming at you, and it's a lot of meetings, and it's a lot of, office work. And I was assigning things to freelancers and jealous of them. I wanted to be the one going out and interviewing and talking to people and thinking and writing. And so I burst into tears one morning, and my husband told me to quit, and I quit. And Ray said, "Would you stay as a staff writer?" And I said, "Oh yeah, that's what I would love to do." And then I was happy for 14 years.
It is hard, and I want to reemphasize that. If you're artistic in any way, whether it's writing or acting or being on radio, TV, anything like that, it is tough to make a living.
Oh, God, yeah.
Right. And my career's always been radio and TV, but for 2 years, I had no writing experience, but I wrote a column for the Alton Telegraph for 2 years, and I had so much fun.
Oh, yeah.
But you're right. Who makes a living these days simply by being a journalist? I mean, maybe if you work in the New York Times or stuff, but...
Well, it depends on how you define a living. I think you are not going to be able to expect a lot of conspicuous consumption. You can eke out a living in most ways, and,
And side hustles and that kind of thing, right?
Yeah, I've always freelanced a bit on the side. I took a pay cut to go to WashU because the freedom and the intellectual atmosphere just sounded like the right thing at this time.
That's at the Common Reader, which is what you're doing now. And you've just been on the job a month or so?
Since Halloween. I'll never forget my start date. I chose it on purpose. I thought, it's time to lighten up a little bit.
Or you knew it was going to be scary, so you just went ahead and did it.
Oh, no. I love Halloween.
Is that the kind of job where you go into the office every day? Or
No.
Writers can work from home.
I know that, and now I do. Yeah, which is thrilling. I go in at least once or twice a week just because I love the campus. And I meet people. I met a young graduate student in neuroscience yesterday, and we talked about all sorts of things that I'll use for essay fodder. And then I went over to the Commons, and they were serving tea and scones, and there was a fire going. So yeah, I'll be there often.
Did you get invited to any fraternity parties? Or?
No.
I think
I didn't like them back. Although I did steal the Phi Cap composite at Mizzou.
You did?
I'm really proud of that. Yeah, they loved that. They were so proud of their composite.
I'm glad we got that on tape.
Yeah, my friend and I went in, stole it, hid it.
So if I missed it, what was your very first journalism job?
I guess it depends on how you count it, but probably I wrote for my alumni magazine, if you count that, and ended up the editor, and that was at St. Louis U. And so it became a full-color publication, and we won a lot of awards, and that was great fun too because there was no pressure to sell. You didn't have to worry about cover sales or newsstand or advertisers. just anything with any connection to SLU was fair game.
And what was your next job after that?
Then I went to an earlier incarnation of St. Louis Magazine, down on the landing. Steve Friedman was the editor. I was the managing editor, which essentially is traffic cop. He later told me that my predecessor wound up in therapy. And we had it was really fun. I mean, we all were young and we all wore black all the time and thought we were cool and went out for drinks after work.
You thought you were cool or you were cool?
Judgment call. But it was really fun, but it was also very stressful and very chaotic. The book would go up 8 pages and then down 8 pages within half an hour, and you had to supply the copy, cut the copy. We never knew what we were doing, really. It was all just seat of the pants, and then we had a production manager who about 2 o'clock every afternoon would be so stressed out that she would hurl what was a landline. She would pick it up, hurl it to the floor. How it never broke, I don't know, and scream something I can't say on air. And that just happened every day.
You know what happened if you throw a phone on the ground now?
Yeah.
What about the job after that one?
Let's see. Oh, then I got engaged to somebody who turned out not to be somebody I wanted to marry. And
Did you ever write about that?
Yeah.
Did
yeah,
you really?
I think I did. Well, no, what I wrote first was why single women hate St. Louis. And that was right when I was all happily engaged and thought that period of my life was over. Because it's hard to be single in St. Louis.
Why?
Because it's so family-centered and because it's so cliquish. And so if you're not already hooked up with somebody, and I mean that neutrally, you're really sort of floundering. You know, the old ways, like meeting somebody in church or because you're in the same neighborhood your whole life, are starting to ease away. People don't have group hobbies so much anymore. They sit at home with their media.
Did you always have people's mothers trying to hook you up, fix you up and stuff like that?
No, I was usually begging for that. Yeah. I finally met my husband because a friend fixed us up on a double date because she wanted the other couple to meet. We were all in the PhD program together.
Wow.
And the other couple were meant for each other. And Andrew and I were laughing, watching those two going, they're so perfect. But within a year, all 4 of us were married.
Do you ever write about your current relationship?
My husband of 26 years? All the time.
You do, really?
Mm-hmm, but I always check it with him first.
What kind of line of work is he in? He's not in journalism, is he?
No, he's an historian. So he gives me the background for any story I write that has anything to do with history. I really couldn't write anymore without him.
Well, a lot of people know you from your many years of writing here in St. Louis. And when we come back, we're going to talk about some of your favorite stories and things that you've covered.
Okay.
And what's ahead for you, too.
Okay.
Jeanette Cooperman is our guest today on City Corner. We'll be back right after this.
What I love about St. Louis is the 79 unique neighborhoods nestled into 108 city parks, including Forest Park, which is actually larger than Central Park in New York, and of course, the beautiful Tower Grove Park where I'm at now. Oh, the St. Louis Blues. We've got the St. Louis Surge, 2-time WBCBL champions. We've got Harris Stowe, WashU, St. Louis University, and of course, the 11-time World Series champion, St. Louis Cardinals. So come experience St. Louis.
Today we're talking with Jeanette Cooperman, who you may have seen her byline many times over the years. St. Louis Magazine, Riverfront Times. She's now at a new position with the Common Reader, which is affiliated with Washington University. And Jeanette, you've just been on the job, I guess, a month or so.
Yes.
And we'll talk more about that in just a little bit. You know, I was thinking about you, since I've done mostly radio and TV and a little bit of newspaper, and I'm guilty of it too. When you read a newspaper, I almost never see the byline. It's so easy not to notice who the author is. Isn't that kind of funny? And haven't you noticed that too?
Oh yeah, I used to never know bylines, and then of course the minute you're doing it, you notice everybody's byline.
So my point of bringing that up is there are probably people that have read 200 of your articles and just don't realize it was your articles.
Well, I know it was funny when we started dating. I must have made some comment about liking opossums and raccoons and people hating them. And my husband said, I read this great article in the RFT about wildlife rehab. And I was like, I wrote that.
No, you're kidding. Yeah. That's unbelievable. Well, a lot of people know you probably from your most recent venture, which was St. Louis Magazine.
Yes.
How long were you there?
Oh, almost 15 years.
Wow.
Loved it.
Were you in every month?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
but you've written about a lot of stories that were big news in St. Louis, of whether it was Pamela Huff or whoever it might be, and I'd love to
Chris
talk about.
Coleman,
Yeah, you name it. But we've got some images. I think some are from the magazine, some are other things that you've done. Why don't we take a look at a couple of those right now?
Okay.
Right there.
Should I look over here? Okay. Yeah, those are absolutely gorgeous Arabian horses that are being bred over in Illinois near you by this gentleman who wanted to restore the breed. It was dying out, and they were kept pure by the nomads in Saudi, and then they were sort of in danger because when Europeans got them, they started mixing them with other sorts of horses. And so this guy is restoring, and he's now been traveling back to Saudi Arabia, talking to the royal family, working on a genetic database there, helping them learn how to care for horses humanely, you know, new methods. So it's exciting. I mean, you never know what's here and how it's connecting around the world. Oh, the Bart magazine. Yeah, I really like, as we talked about dogs, I really like writing about animals. So was a freelance thing. I've written a bit for them.
Are you an animal lover in particular?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, any.
Let's look at one more. Oh, here you are.
That was a documentary about environmental toxins out in Weldon Spring, long before Coldwater, but the same sort of thing. And it wound up shown in Germany, so I thought it was fun to have subtitles.
Do you know what that says at the bottom?
Not exactly, but I'm sure I said it.
Jeanette, what do you think about journalism these days? Boy, that's a big question, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a very big question. I think that we have yet to figure out new ways to be profitable. I worry a lot about the future of investigative journalism because that's quick to be cast aside. It costs a lot.
We see this in broadcast journalism also.
Do you?
Don't you?
Well, yeah, I see it all over the place. I didn't know what your direct reference was.
Oh, more just sensational short stories, not details, and a lot of time with backstories.
Exactly. Exactly. And it's a very expensive proposition to let somebody go for a month or two and dig into something. But without that, you know, we don't have much of a democracy. So I worry about that. I do notice, though, we heard all the time at St. Louis Magazine, and they continue to hear, grateful readers when instead of somebody having to only rely on dribs and drabs and quick news flashes, we would pull together a complicated story, whether it was on TIFs or airport privatization or just some complicated, interesting personality in St. Louis or a murder trial that was really Byzantine, and pull it together all at once and write it long form so that people could just settle in with a cup of coffee and really feel like they understood it. I think we all sometimes feel like we're just overstimulated and getting bits of information, but not context and not a way to have it be cohesive.
Yeah, I guess it's old-fashioned, but it's so easy to look stuff up on your device, whatever it might be. But you mentioned the cup of coffee. I like holding a newspaper in my hand and turning the pages.
I also think there's some brain research on the fact that you learn differently and you absorb and remember differently.
Right.
I know in my book club, everybody else uses a Kindle, and I still use a paper book, and it's interesting because it's a different kind of response. And then audiobooks, I remember even better because you hear emotion.
Right.
And emotion sticks.
Let's look at some more images of some of the stories you've covered over the years as a journalist in St. Louis. We're talking about Jeanette Cooperman. And you mentioned poodles earlier. No,
Yeah, there we go.
that's not a toy poodle, but it's a
No,
poodle.
no, that's a big old poodle.
Well, tell me about him.
Oh, his name is Louis, and he's probably the worst behaved but most cuddly and earnest dog we've had yet.
Worst behaved, is that because of his parents? I'm talking about
I think
you.
oh no, not us. No, I was going back to original. We got him when he was 7.
Oh,
Yeah, I wanted a puppy, and my husband pulled up the dogs that needed homes and said, this dog will never find his forever home.
but he did. Yeah.
So we got him.
Who's this?
That is Stéphane Deneuve, the new artistic director of the symphony, and he's just fabulous. That's the best thing about writing profiles. You know.
Okay, tell me about him, because, you know, I've heard he's there. I know the name. I don't know anything about him.
Oh,
What does he
he's
bring to the table?
Irrepressibly delightful and warm. Also very brilliantly talented. But he has a lovely, I don't mean to be stereotypical about romanticism in France, but he certainly understands the dynamics of expressive music, and he's able to take that symphony to huge climaxes of crescendo and sound and then go so soft, maybe softer than they've ever played. The dynamics are amazing, and he has a very particular sensibility.
And over the last 100 years or so, he has some big shoes to fill.
Yes, oh, very.
Let's look at another image from your past in journalism.
This is like, where's the
I didn't mean
ghost of...
past. I didn't mean to sound so ominous.
There should be chains clanking, right? That wasn't journalism, actually. That was my doctoral dissertation that got turned into a book. So,
Okay, go to the next one.
murder mystery that I wrote.
Well, tell me about that.
Oh, well,
Because Elaine Veitch is a friend of mine.
yes, and
I
she
like a
writes
good murder
amazing
mystery.
murder mysteries.
So-
Well, it's I'm sure you could find all sorts of traces of St. Louis, and you know it's set here, and there are Jesuits, and there are all sorts of interconnections.
But what's the core drama?
Oh, you don't want to hear all that. It's too convoluted. That's
I've
one
gotta-
reason I stopped. I don't plot well.
I got to go buy the book.
Go buy the book. Yeah.
Well, how do you feel about writing fiction as opposed to nonfiction, just personally?
I love fiction because I love the ability to create a world and just live in it when you're bored with the real one. But I'm not very good at it. I think I'm a lot better starting with what's at hand and trying to use techniques of fiction to make it vivid and readable and interesting. I think I feel more comfortable that way. I get a little too convoluted when I plot, and I have a terrible time thinking of villains. I love murder mysteries because I like the solve, the camaraderie of people trying to figure something out. But yeah, I don't think I do it well.
I just want.
So maybe don't buy that book.
I'm going to buy it anyway. Tell me just about your philosophy about being a journalist. You know, you hear a lot of criticisms of biased journalists, and I think true journalists aren't biased. True journalists aren't biased.
No.
But what's the? And I'm sure every journalist, most journalists, try very hard not to be.
Yeah, I think it's a little like racism. You have to own it first. I kind of disagree. I think we're all biased. But once you know your biases, you can try to compensate. Sometimes we overcompensate. You see that in politics, where people give so much airtime to the candidate they don't like that it's almost tilting. But what I think is most important, at least in investigative and long-form journalism, is to actually think about the vulnerability of the subject and not just race for your story, your best story. Because a lot of times I would interview somebody who didn't fully understand what they were exposing or what the consequences might be. And I think you have to take responsibility for them and over-explain it, not just be thrilled that you've got a quote. So that's something that I feel like ethically is incumbent on us.
You know, I mentioned Pam Huff earlier, and for people that don't know, it was recently in the news within the last year or two. She was the woman who was accused of killing a couple of people that she knew for complicated reasons. Was
Yes.
that one of the most crazy stories you've covered lately?
Yeah, that really was one of the craziest ever.
And did you talk to her?
No, I didn't. She was not talking to anyone. But I talked to people, I found people she went to school with, you know, back in high school. And that was interesting because
Did anybody kind of have a peek into the future?
no, they were broadsided. They said that she was fun, she was never moody, there was no drama.
Okay, that's what's scary.
I know, and she wasn't even gossipy. But it also makes sense if you think about it, Steve, because she had that kind of ability to compartmentalize and detach and not get so emotionally involved and empathic. So she didn't have need of drama or emotional upset.
And didn't she get like this close with getting away with it?
Yeah. She made a whole lot of mistakes at the end, but had it not been for the woman who happened to have a camera that happened to catch her van and the license plate and the I Love Dogs sticker, God help us, I don't know that they would have found it that quickly. They still would have because the money was a giveaway.
What a story.
Yeah.
We just got a couple of minutes left. Let's look as many more images as we can, the time remaining, and just comment on them.
That's a profile of Bunny Herring, who's amazing. She was, I think, in her 80s when she learned trapeze. She's just somebody with an irrepressible love of life, and she was great fun to write about. That's Cornell McKay, who was wrongfully accused, as so many people have been, and at least got justice in the end. There's somebody else I wrote about, Bertha Owen, that I'm still hoping that will happen to. That is the pretender to the Lemp descendancy. He claimed he was Andrew Lemp and fooled a lot of people. He's not.
Wow.
Yeah, con artists fascinate me.
Me too.
Yeah.
Eric Greitens,
Of
right?
course, is our former
Speaking
governor.
of, should I say that?
Yeah, well, you can say whatever you like. Those were happier days for him.
Yeah, you actually met him, and it was an odd experience.
Yeah, I hung out with him quite a bit. Yeah,
And you had warning signs, but we won't go into it now.
I did. Yeah, it's.
Listen, in the few seconds we have left, you've left your long history of journalism with magazines. You're now at WashU with the Common Reader, which is available online. So again, what is it, and how do people find it?
Well, it's a journal of the essay. We cover all sorts of things. There's no way to narrow the topic list. You can go to the website and you can sign up for a newsletter that is absolutely free that comes only once a month, so it's not going to crowd your inbox.
And the website is Common Reader at wustl.edu.
Yes.
And what have you done for them so
I think
far?
that's right. I'm new, so I got to make sure it's not .com, but Google it if that's not right. What have I done? Oh, I've done quite a few things. They're up on the site already, and I'm working on a long piece.
Well, Jeanette, we just wanted to have you here to review your history in journalism, and you bring a great insight to it. And success on your new adventure.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here.
You bet, Jeanette. My pleasure. I'm Steve Potter. Thank you for being part of today's show, and we'll see you next time.